I stood outside the church for 7 minutes before I opened the door. That's how long it took me to remember how to breathe properly. There was a boy beside the entrance offering programs, his cheeks flushed with the kind of polite discomfort reserved for people who have nowhere to place their hands. When he looked at me, his smile faltered. I must have looked strange to him. A woman too old for the lace shawl she was clutching, dressed in a faded blue suit that had hung in my closet since my husband's funeral. I didn't take a program. I nodded at him once and walked inside, my heels clicking softly on the polished tile like an accusation. The air inside smelled of white roses and hairspray. Every pew gleamed with careful polish, and a string quartet murmured something light and forgettable. I spotted her immediately, the way a mother always does, even when time has stretched and blurred her child's face in memory. She was laughing at something, her head tilted, veil pinned loosely like she wasn't sure she wanted it all the way on. For a second I imagined she saw me too. I hoped she did. Not because I wanted her to run into my arms, but because I needed her to know I was real. She turned fully then, and her smile vanished so fast it felt choreographed. There was a pause in the room that no one else seemed to notice, but I felt it in the marrow of my spine. She whispered something to the man beside her. He turned. His eyes searched the room, landed on me, then flicked away. I moved toward an empty pew in the back, but before I could sit, I heard her voice. "That woman," she said, not loudly but firmly enough to ripple. "She's not supposed to be here. She's not who she says she is. She's not my mother." There are moments in life when humiliation doesn't announce itself with shouting or shame, but with silence so complete it rings. No one said anything. The quartet played on. A woman near me glanced sideways, as if I might be carrying a disease. I didn't sit. I didn't move. I just stood there, letting the words soak through me like ink on damp paper. I stayed until the music changed. Not out of defiance. God knows I wasn't brave enough for that. But because my knees had locked and my heart was doing something slow and heavy in my chest. When I finally turned to leave, I didn't cry. I held my head so high I gave myself a migraine by nightfall. I made it home just before the sky bruised into dusk, and I stood in my kitchen for a long time with my coat still on, trying to remember when exactly my daughter stopped believing I was hers. I boiled water for tea. Didn't drink it. The TV blinked in the background. Some cooking show with bright colors and cheerful lies. I pulled out the envelope I'd tucked into my bag that morning, already stamped and sealed. It had taken me a year to get the timing right, but I'd waited until she got the promotion. Until she posted about it online with a caption that didn't mention the mother who paid her tuition. I owned the company. Not directly, not in a way that let me strut through the office and see her desk, but my signature was on the documents that built it. She'd never known. I'd made sure of that. I liked the distance. It made it easier to love her from afar. But that night, I called the HR manager and told him there'd been a breach in conduct. I gave no explanation. I didn't have to. That's the thing about power when it's silent. It doesn't ask for understanding. I watched the stars appear one by one, like apologies I hadn't earned, and felt something in me begin to unclench. I wasn't angry. I was tired in a way that made sleep useless. I'd always known this day might come. I just didn't think she'd say it so cleanly. She's not my mother. You can call a woman a liar. You can call her cruel. But to call her unreal, that's a kind of erasure you don't recover from. She didn't know it yet, but the next morning, she'd wake up jobless. I didn't do it to hurt her. Not really. I did it because I needed her to understand what it felt like to be erased. And still a part of me hoped, absurdly, pathetically, that she'd come to my door even then. That she'd knock, call me mom, cry into my coat. But I already knew she'd call instead. That she'd beg in the voice she used as a child when she broke something she couldn't fix. I knew because I would have done the same. But when that call came, I'd already rehearsed what I'd say. It's strange how memory doesn't line up neatly. Like film reels spooled in perfect order. Comes at you sideways. Through smells, through the sound of gravel under tires, through the feeling of a certain breeze that touches your neck just right. That night after the wedding I couldn't sleep. I sat in my old recliner with a blanket over my knees and let the past sift itself up from the floorboards. I remembered the first time I held her. August. Air thick with heat and the scent of disinfectant. She came out with a cry like tearing paper, her mouth wide and furious, her little fists balled tight as secrets. They placed her on my chest, And for one terrifying second, I didn't feel anything at all. Then it hit, like a wave that had been building all along, far out where I couldn't see it. I cried harder than she did. Not from joy, not even from relief, but from the weight of knowing everything was about to change. And I wasn't sure I was enough. Her name was mine to choose. I picked something strong, something sharp-sounding. I wanted her to grow up with a name that couldn't be softened or shortened. I gave her mine too, tucked at the end like a promise I would never leave her. And I didn't. Not really. Not when she screamed through the nights. Not when her father left before she could talk. Not when we had to share a single coat between us for 2 winters straight. I was there. Every parent says that. But I was. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and windows that sighed when the wind picked up. I worked nights cleaning offices and came home to cook oatmeal and pack lunches. She hated the smell of bleach on my hands. Used to wipe her cheeks after I kissed them. That used to sting in ways I never admitted. Not even now. I raised her to be better than me. Not in the cheap, self-deprecating way some parents do. I mean, I made damn sure she had every book she ever asked for, every class she wanted to try. Dance, debate, that brief, disastrous violin phase. I said yes more than I should have. I smiled through every parent-teacher meeting, every science fair where she never looked at me from the stage. I swallowed my pride when she started correcting my grammar at 13. She used to love me. Or maybe she just needed me. I'm old enough now to know there's a difference. High school changed things. She got quiet, polished. Her friends started dressing the same way she did. Pencil skirts, French braids, shoes without scuffs. I stopped being mom in public. I became my mother. She made it sound like a condition, like something she had to explain away. College was the final cut. She got a scholarship and left in a rush, barely packing, barely looking back. I helped her move into that dorm, hauled boxes up 3 flights of stairs while she fluttered around her new roommates. When I tried to hug her goodbye, she winced like I was being inappropriate. "I'll call you later," she said. She didn't. I called. Of course I did. Weekly, then monthly, then not at all. She never answered. Text came back short. Busy. Midterms. Internship. I learned to interpret silence as survival. Hers, not mine. The years piled up. I watched her grow from a distance, like a plant in someone else's garden. She got her degree, a good job. I only found out she'd been hired at my company because a junior manager mentioned her last name over coffee. My heart seized, then steadied. She didn't know it was mine. I made sure no one said a word. I watched her rise, careful and clean. She was smart. She smiled at the right moments. She knew how to vanish herself in the exact corporate way that wins favor. She reminded me of myself once, before I let motherhood wear down my sharp edges. I wanted to call her to congratulate her. But I didn't. I'd already learned not to reach where I wasn't welcome. And yet, some part of me still believed the story would circle back. That there'd be a knock one day, a letter, a photograph slid under the door. That maybe she'd sit at my table again and ask for the recipe to my soup, or the name of the song I used to hum while folding laundry. That one day she'd see me not as an obstacle to overcome, but as the woman who shaped her spine. But then came the wedding.
No invitasten.
No notice. I found out the date through an old neighbor who still followed her on social media. I thought it had to be a mistake. That maybe she'd sent the card and it got lost. That she'd call at the last minute, breathless and apologetic. That she'd ask me to help her pin the veil. I even bought a pair of white gloves just in case. Old-fashioned. Hopeful. Foolish. So when she called me an imposter, it didn't just hurt. It shattered the story I'd kept alive inside my ribs. I thought I was the mother who'd been forgotten. But maybe I was never the mother she remembered in the first place. That's what I thought about in the dark, long after the wedding ended. Not the insult itself, but the possibility that it had always been true. I closed my eyes and tried to recall the last time she said my name like it meant something. I couldn't. That kind of forgetting is worse than grief. At least with grief, there's proof something once lived. I woke before dawn, the room still gray with the kind of light that makes everything look like it's made of smoke. My tea from the night before had grown cold, the cup sweating faint rings onto the wood. I sat there for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum like a tired breath. Everything felt too still, as if the world itself was holding back some judgment. I didn't need it. I had my own. In the corner of the living room, just beyond the armchair where my husband used to sit reading newspapers he never finished, there was a wooden chest. I hadn't opened it in years. Dust gathered in its corners like guilt. It held things I thought I might want again someday. Photographs, letters, the baby shoes with the tiny buckle she'd always try to chew. I opened it slowly, half expecting the smell to knock me sideways. The photos were yellowing. Her smile was different then. Freer, less rehearsed. There was one picture of us at a lake, her head against my knee, a juice box in her hand. My fingers lingered on it longer than they should have. I wanted to put it back, pretend I hadn't needed it. Instead, I took the photo out, pressed it flat between my palms, and walked it over to the mantel. There was an empty frame waiting there. I'd left it that way on purpose years ago. I told myself I liked the simplicity. The truth was I couldn't choose a picture. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt safe enough to make permanent. But that morning, after the wedding, after the words that sliced clean and left no blood, I filled it. I stood it up straight and stepped back. It looked wrong. She didn't belong there anymore, not in this house, not after what she said. And yet, I didn't move the frame. Let it mock me. Let it stay like a scar. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The HR manager's contact information was still saved in a folder labeled Company Matters. I had always liked her job title, Operations Liaison, something vague enough to impress people. She'd worked hard for it, I won't pretend she hadn't. But she had also climbed stairs I built with hands she now pretended not to know. The email was brief. 4 sentences.
No emotion, no explanation.
I asked that her contract be terminated immediately, citing loss of confidence in professional conduct. I signed it with my full name. No one would question it. I had stayed quiet all these years, but when I did speak, people listened. I sent the email, then closed the computer like it might bite me. She would find out by 9 a.m. They always sent the notices early, so no one lingered at their desks too long. I imagined her unlocking her office door. Her coffee still warm, the monitor blinking awake. The envelope would be on her chair, or worse, handed to her by someone who didn't know the story. I felt nothing. That worried me. Anger I could have explained. Sadness even. But this, it was something quieter, more final. Like placing a stone on a grave you weren't sure anyone else would visit. My phone rang once around noon. A number I recognized, though not from memory, just a vague sense of familiarity. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. I didn't check the message. Whatever she had to say, I already knew its shape. Begging wears a certain rhythm in the throat. I've worn it myself once. I made soup that night, the kind she used to eat with too many crackers. I crushed the herbs by hand. The scent filled the kitchen and reminded me of winter nights when she'd come home late and exhausted and let me tuck her in without protest. Back then, I still believed that love was something you could earn back if you waited long enough. If you kept showing up. But time had taught me better. It had taught me that you can't always fix the story, no matter how long you leave the porch light on. I sat at the table with a bowl of soup and the wedding program I'd taken from the church, folded tightly in my coat pocket. I hadn't even realized I'd picked one up. The paper was soft at the edges, the ink smudged slightly from my thumb. Her name was there, printed in cursive. Elegant. As if that girl had always belonged in white silk and matching linens. I placed the program under the soup bowl like a placemat and ate slowly, spoon by spoon until nothing remained. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves scraped against the windows. Somewhere in the house, a door shifted open just slightly, the old wood giving way to something unseen. I didn't move to close it. She received the envelope at 8:47 a.m. That's what the timestamp on the security log would later confirm. It was handed to her by a woman named Denise from HR. A kind soul who always brought peppermint tea to meetings and wore perfume that reminded me of spring mornings before my husband died. Denise wouldn't have known. No one at the office did. That's how carefully I'd hidden the truth. How completely I'd let myself disappear from the version of the world my daughter inhabited. I imagined her fingers tracing the seal, confusion furrowing that perfect space between her brows. She would have looked around, half believing it was a mistake, a document meant for someone else. But the name was hers. Printed clearly. Deliberate. Inside one sheet. No apology. No suggestion of further discussion. Just the facts. Effective immediately. We thank you for your service. Return all company property by the end of the day. She must have stood there for a long time, staring at the paper as if it might rewrite itself. Maybe she laughed. Maybe she cursed. But I know my daughter. What she would have felt first, even before shame or panic, was betrayal. That tight-coiled horror that comes from realizing the ground beneath you isn't solid. That someone had pulled the rug, and you hadn't even seen the hands move. That was what I wanted her to feel. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to see. To understand that I hadn't wandered into her wedding as a ghost. That I had been standing beside her, beneath her, behind her, all along. I didn't leave the house that day. I sat by the window with a blanket over my knees and watched the mail truck pass 3 times without stopping. The silence in the house was clean, untouched. My phone sat on the side table face down. It hadn't rung again. Not yet. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the box. A simple cardboard thing. Inside, all the performance reviews I'd followed. Every quarterly report with her name highlighted. I had watched her grow in that company like a gardener watches something bloom. Proud, distant, terrified it would outgrow the fence. She had. And then she'd pretended she'd never been planted here to begin with. In one report, a note from a supervisor shows strong leadership potential. Needs to be reminded not to overcompensate. That last line caught me. I knew exactly what it meant. She was trying too hard to prove she belonged. That she wasn't just someone's daughter who got lucky. That she had made herself. I closed the box and slid it back into the drawer. Let it sit like a tomb. At 2:12 p.m. the phone rang again. This time I answered. I didn't say anything at first. Just listened. Her voice came through small, tight, unfamiliar. Mom. A pause. I don't understand what's happening. They let me go. They won't tell me why. Was it you? Was this your decision? She knew already. The question wasn't a real one. It was something softer. A plea. Like if she could get me to say no, then everything might still go back. I said nothing. Mom, please, she whispered. I didn't mean it. What I said at the wedding, I was panicked. I didn't think you'd show up. It was a mistake. I thought it would be easier if you weren't there. But you are my mother. Of course you are. I was just angry. I was scared. I waited until her voice cracked, until it bent itself into the shape of that little girl I used to carry home from school when the snow was too thick. Then I spoke. Quiet. Clear. Final. I'm not your mother, remember? You said it yourself. I'm just some woman pretending to be someone I'm not. She sobbed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just that soft kind of breaking that sounds like cloth being torn in half. Please. Don't do this. But I was already putting the phone down. Not slamming it. Not making a show. Just placing it back in its cradle like something old and sacred. Something I didn't want to destroy but couldn't hold anymore. The silence that followed was different than before. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That night I didn't cook. Didn't read. I sat in the garden until the moon rose, watching the leaves twitch in the wind. A cat I didn't know curled itself on my porch and stayed there, quiet and breathing, as if it understood something I didn't. I didn't touch the frame on the mantel. Didn't look at the photo. I just let the night settle around me, soft and unapologetic. The next morning, the sky was a dull sheet of pewter. No rain, just that heavy stillness that presses against your chest like unsaid words. I stood at the sink peeling an apple one didn't want, watching the curl of skin drop into the basin in one unbroken ribbon. My hands were steady. My thoughts weren't. She hadn't called again, not after the last time. I figured she wouldn't. There's only so much pride a person can strip off before they start mistaking humiliation for redemption. And my daughter had always been careful with appearances, even as a child. She once cried for an hour when she lost a spelling bee, not because she cared about the word diaphragm, but because she couldn't stand the way people looked at her when she failed. But that morning the phone rang. I didn't rush to answer it. I let it ring twice. 3 times. 4. Then, with a sigh so deep it came from the oldest part of me, I lifted the receiver. Mom, she said, before I could even speak. That word. Like a blade and a bomb. Like she knew exactly where to press to make it hurt most. I know I don't deserve to ask you anything. I know I said terrible things. But please just talk to me. Her voice was threadbare, fraying at the edges, exhausted from holding itself together. I imagined her sitting in whatever apartment she lived in now, makeup smudged, jobless, phone clutched like a lifeline. She probably hadn't eaten. Maybe she hadn't slept. I can't fix it, she continued. I know that. But I didn't mean to erase you. I've been trying so hard to survive. To prove I could do it without needing anyone. Without needing you. Because I didn't want to owe you anything. I wanted you to be proud of me without feeling like I was still a child. She paused, then laughed, a dry, broken sound. But maybe I am. Maybe I still am, because I don't know what to do right now. I lost my job, my name's all over the employee forums, and I don't know who I am anymore without that desk, that title. And I thought if I could just hear you say my name. I closed my eyes. I should have hung up then. I should have spared us both. But the thing about motherhood is it's like a phantom limb. Even when it's gone, you still feel it twitch. You still reach for it in the dark, forgetting it was cut off long ago. You called me an imposter, I said. She was silent. In front of strangers. In front of people who never knew I spent years patching holes in your shoes with glue. Who never saw me walk to work in the snow so you could take the bus. You stood there, in that white dress I used to dream about affording for you, and you told the world I was a stranger. I know, she whispered. I was wrong. No, I said. You were honest. That's what made it hurt. She choked on a breath. The kind that sounds like it came with tears, but you're too proud to let them fall. I didn't want to ruin your wedding, I added. I just wanted to see you happy, even if it wasn't with me. A long pause. I can't fix what's broken between us, I continued. Maybe I should have been a different kind of mother. Softer. Easier. But I gave you everything I had, and you pretended I didn't exist. I was scared, she said. I thought maybe if I cut you out clean it wouldn't hurt so much. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. It does, I said. It always does. Another silence. Longer this time. Heavier. So what now? She asked, barely audible. Do I just disappear? I looked around the kitchen. The apple lay in the sink, peeled but untouched. The house smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, but nothing fell. No, I said. You don't get to disappear. You said I wasn't your mother. So let's make it true. Her breath caught. Don't call me again, I said. Not with anger. Not with drama. Just with the quiet certainty of someone who has finally, painfully, let go of a rope they've been burning their hands on for too long. Then I placed the phone down. Not slammed. Not thrown. Just placed. And for the first time in years, I sat in silence without needing to fill it. The days that followed were neither sharp nor soft. They just were. I moved through them like someone who had forgotten what it meant to move for herself. I fed the cat that had started sleeping on my porch, though I never gave it a name. I made soup from the scraps of the week before. I sat by the window and watched the street carry on as if the world hadn't ended in the way mine had. Then one morning, I wandered into the garden. It had been weeks since I'd touched it, maybe longer. The basil had turned bitter, the tomatoes collapsed inward like they'd given up. But the mint still spread like wildfire, refusing to be tamed. I knelt down beside the parsley, fingering the yellowed edges of a leaf, and remembered how she used to pick it with me. Not because she liked it, but because she wanted to help. Or maybe she just wanted to be near me then. There was one summer. We must have been in the apartment still, before the move to the house. When she spent every afternoon digging tiny trenches in the soil, trying to grow strawberries from the seeds of ones I bought at the market. She didn't understand why they never sprouted. She cried once, quietly, when she thought I wasn't looking. I told her some things don't grow in certain places, no matter how badly we want them to. She didn't believe me. I think I didn't believe it, either. Not back then. I sat in the dirt for a long time, hands buried wrist-deep in earth, waiting for something to come loose inside me. Regret, maybe. Or anger. But what I felt instead was a strange and aching tenderness. The kind that doesn't rush in, but creeps up slow and warm like sunlight after a storm. I missed her. Not the woman she had become, but the child she used to be. The one who trusted me with her nightmares. The one who asked for bedtime stories I made up on the spot. It was too easy to remember her cruelty and forget the softness that came before. Too easy to become a story about vengeance instead of one about loss. I could have called her. The number still sat on the caller ID, preserved like a bruise. But I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust myself to tell the truth if she answered. I had wanted to hurt her. I could admit that now. Not out of hate, but because I had loved her so completely, and been forgotten so fully, that I didn't know where else to put the ache. Firing her hadn't solved anything. It had just changed the shape of the silence between us. That night, I dreamed of her as a child. She stood at the kitchen table, covered in flour, her hands buried in dough. She looked up and smiled like nothing had ever gone wrong. When I woke, I could still smell the bread that never was. I walked through the house in the dark, touching the corners of rooms I hadn't entered in months. Her old bedroom still held the echo of her. Stickers on the mirror, a cracked snow globe, a hairbrush with 3 strands of hair still tangled in the bristles. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up a paperback from the nightstand. She had left it here the last time she visited years ago. I opened it to the first page. Her name was written inside in big block letters, underlined twice. She had wanted to be seen. Maybe we both had. The garden called to me again the next morning. I brought out clippers and gloves and spent the better part of an hour trimming back the mint. I tore out the basil, replanted some lavender, pulled weeds with more force than necessary. The cat watched from the porch, tail flicking with disinterest. There was something sacred about the act. Not healing, exactly, but grounding. Like I was making room for something new, even if I didn't yet know what it was. I told myself I was doing it for me. That was only partly true. At sunset, I left a small bundle of rosemary and mint on the steps, tied with twine. I didn't know if she'd come. I didn't know if she even remembered how much she used to love that scent. But I wanted to give something even if it went unseen. That's the thing about gardens, they grow even when no one is watching, even when no one believes they will. And sometimes, if you're lucky, something unexpected takes root. It was a Wednesday when I found myself walking into the wrong church. The sky was overcast in that indecisive way it gets in early spring, flickering between rain and something resembling light. I hadn't planned on going anywhere. I'd gone out to buy bread. That was all. A simple errand. But my feet turned left instead of right, and before I knew it, I was standing in the vestibule of a building that smelled like lemon polish and lilies. A funeral was about to begin. I stayed. Not out of curiosity, or any twisted longing for mourning, but because something in me, some quiet, primitive ache, needed to witness grief that wasn't mine. The casket was closed. The pews filled slowly with people dressed in the kind of black that had been pulled from the backs of closets in a hurry. I sat near the back alone. No one questioned me. In churches, everyone is assumed to belong. Pain makes good camouflage. They were burying a woman named Lillian. I learned this from the program someone had left folded on the seat beside me. Lillian had 2 daughters, a husband who died a decade ago, and a reputation for making soup for anyone who ever lost a job or a parent or a home. Her daughters stood at the front and spoke about her laugh. About how she never gave advice unless it was asked for, and how she kept shoeboxes of letters she never sent. I listened without blinking. Each word landed like a bruise. Not because I envied the woman, but because I recognized her. A little too well. I wondered if my daughter would speak like that for me. I wondered if she'd show up at all. And worse, if she did, would she sit at the back and pretend she hadn't once erased me in front of an entire church? The grief in that room was soft. Honest. People cried without wiping their eyes. They touched each other's backs in passing. A man near me passed out tissues to strangers. I took one, though I didn't use it. I just held it, a crumple of kindness in my palm. After the service, I followed the crowd outside and stood near the edges of the cemetery, pretending to know where to look. The daughters wept openly. One of them, barely older than my own, read a poem about forgiveness and unopened letters. I don't believe in signs. But something in me cracked. I stayed until the last handful of soil was thrown. Then I walked home, slower than I had in years. The streets blurred at the edges. Not with tears, but with a disorientation I hadn't expected, as if I'd stepped out of one version of life and into another, and nothing looked quite the same. I stopped at a bench near the corner store, sat for 10 full minutes, watched a boy try to catch a pigeon with a plastic bag, watched him fail, laugh, try again. When I finally got home, I stood in the doorway for a while, unsure if I was arriving or leaving. The house felt different. I moved through it with care, touching furniture like it might break under my hands. The photo on the mantel was still there. Her smile, frozen in a time before we learned how to hurt each other best. I picked it up, held it, studied the edges. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I talked to her. Out loud. Not a speech. Not a confession. Just a few quiet words. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, but I haven't forgotten how to love you. That's the problem. The cat meowed from the kitchen, as if to agree, or maybe just hungry. I made dinner, turned on the radio, let myself imagine for just a moment what it might be like to call her again, to say something small, something stupid. The mince groaned back. I thought you'd want to know. I didn't pick up the phone. Not yet, but I didn't delete her number either. Some days, surviving feels like standing still. Others, like walking into a stranger's grief and finding your own buried beneath it. There's a drawer in my bedroom I haven't opened in over a year. It sticks a little, swells in the summer and creaks in winter like old bones. It's not locked. I never trusted locks, but there's something about the weight of it that keeps my hand away most days. This morning, though, with the cat asleep by the radiator and the wind knocking softly at the windows, I opened it. Inside, a stack of blank stationery, a half-used book of stamps, and 2 letters I wrote but never sent. The first is to her. My daughter. It's written in my neatest handwriting, the kind I used when filling out her school permission slips and college applications. The ink has faded slightly, but the words haven't softened. You don't owe me love. I know that now. But I still remember how you looked at me when you were 5 and thought I could fix anything. I was wrong to expect that look to last forever. I held on to it like a debt you didn't sign for. I forgive you for growing away from me. I'm sorry I didn't know how to grow with you. I never finished it. The second letter is to myself. Not the woman I am now, but the one I was at 35, tired, single, doggedly hopeful, and too proud to admit when she was drowning. You're going to survive this. But survival won't look like you think it will. It'll look like soup gone cold on the stove. Like birthdays remembered in silence. Like a child who forgets the shape of your voice. You'll want to blame yourself. Don't. You gave more than you had to give. That's what love is. Not a bargain, not a mirror, but a door you keep holding open, even after no one walks through. That one I did finish. I just never had the heart to read it until now. I refold both letters. Place them back where I found them. Not out of indecision, but because not every truth is meant to be delivered. Some are just meant to be held quietly, like the sound of your own name when no one said it in a while. Later that afternoon, I walked to the edge of town where the bus depot sits, half forgotten behind a shuttered diner. I sat on the bench beside the timetable and watched the buses come and go. Most people arrived late, fumbling with tickets, apologizing to drivers. One woman arrived early, stood still with her bag clutched to her stomach like a secret. She reminded me of myself. Or maybe of who I thought my daughter might become. I almost didn't notice the man who sat beside me. Older, soft-eyed. He didn't speak at first. Just nodded like we'd done this before. Then, as if sensing something silent inside me, he said, "Waiting for someone?" I shook my head. Not anymore. He smiled, not pitying, not prying. Just understanding. Sometimes they come anyway. We sat for a while in the quiet that comes when people know not to push each other. When he stood to catch his bus, he touched my shoulder. Brief, warm. "Take care," he said. "You look like someone who's holding something heavy." I nodded. "You too." That night, I returned to the garden. The rosemary was thriving. The mint had overgrown again. I clipped a few sprigs, bundled them loosely, and left them on the front step. Just in case. Not for her. Not exactly. For what we used to be. For the version of us that still lives somewhere outside the reach of ruin. I lit a candle in the window. Not as an invitation. Not even as forgiveness. Just a signal. That I am still here. Still real. Still her mother, even if she never says the word again. And some nights that's enough. Some nights that's everything. If this story stirred something in you, grief, recognition, or the fragile hope that love might still find its way back, share it. With a friend, with a mother, with someone who needs to know they are not alone in the quiet aftermath of being forgotten. Stories like this aren't meant to heal cleanly. They're meant to sit beside you like a hand that doesn't let go. See you soon in the next story.